From our State House studio in Montgomery, I'm Todd Stacy. Welcome to Capitol Journal's Week in Review. And what a week it has been in Alabama government and politics. An Alabama Supreme Court ruling from a week ago has produced a growing tsunami of controversy that Alabama leaders are rushing to fix. The court ruled that frozen embryos could be considered children under Alabama law, at least as it concerns civil lawsuits. That led to UAB Health System and other clinics halt their in vitro fertilization treatments as they weigh the risks of being sued if embryos are damaged. In 2018, the Alabama legislature passed and voters ratified a constitutional amendment that made it the policy of the state to protect the rights of unborn children, which is in part what the ruling relied on. This week, state lawmakers began pursuing a legislative fix to the issue. State Senator Tim Melson, who chairs the Senate Health Committee, has drafted legislation to protect IVF clinics by clarifying in the law that only embryos implanted in the uterus can be considered viable human life. I spoke with Melson about his bill on Thursday.
This bill simply made it where in vitro fertilization that you may have stored embryos, but they're only potential life. They don't become life till they're implanted in the uterus and adhere to the wall, and then they become life. I'm not saying or trying to devalue the sanctity of them. Embryos, I get that. I know it's a touchy subject, but I'm just saying that for the purpose of saying there's any viable life, that it's not until it's implanted in the uterus. I mean, you know, you really, we have, science has advanced so far that we have things pop up that were never intended to become a problem or a hindrance to the profession, but this is one of them. So I'm just trying to make it where a clinic, an in vitro fertilization clinic, can function without risk of liability or criminal acts in certain situations.
That full interview with Senator Melson is available online at our YouTube channel or on aptv.org. I encourage you to watch it all. I should also mention that House Minority Leader Anthony Daniels has also filed legislation to address the IVF issue. And today, we've seen a flood of statements from Republican leaders, from Governor Kay Ivey, Speaker Nathaniel Ledbetter, U.S. Senator Katie Britt, and even former President Donald Trump, urging the legislature to pass protections for IVF clinics. The soonest Melson or Daniels bills could pass would not be next week, but the following week if they're following the normal legislative schedule. Coming up later in the show, I'll talk with Dr. Mamie McLean, a fertility clinic specialist whose patients have been impacted by the ruling. That issue aside, it was another busy week in the Alabama legislature as the House and Senate met for the 7th, 8th, and 9th legislative days. In the Senate, members spent more than 7 hours debating one issue: diversity, equity, and inclusion, or DEI. A pending bill would prohibit certain public entities, including K-12 schools and universities, from housing a DEI office or program. It would also prohibit the teaching or promotion of what's termed divisive concepts related to race or gender. Capitol Journal's Jeff Sanders reports.
This is serious. This is a race of people we're talking about.
Heated moments on the floor of the Alabama Senate as lawmakers debated for nearly 7 hours Senate Bill 129 by Republican State Senator Will Barfoot.
Some have said, well, we don't see it here in Alabama. Why are we even talking about it? My response is, we have seen it, we have talked about it, and sometimes there's things we don't see that we don't get a chance to talk about.
While conservative lawmakers say the bill is needed to stop a so-called woke agenda from sweeping through Alabama's higher education system, Democrats worry it could undo decades of gains in diversity and civil rights.
I don't care how much you say I believe and think and all that crap. If you ain't walked in these shoes, you don't know nothing about what really happens when you walk in these shoes. And then it's being discarded.
I mean, my phone started just going crazy Tuesday night, just from advocacy groups, from folks that wanted to have the opportunity to have a public hearing and talk about this, this piece of legislation.
Democrats successfully negotiated amendments to the bill, securing protections for Title IX programs and state minority offices. The legislation ultimately passed the Senate with a vote of 26-7 along party lines.
But the perception is everything about it's prohibited, it's prohibited, it's prohibited. And so when you see that, I think that it will hurt industry. I think it will hurt recruitment to some of these flagship universities.
But the fact is, we really have a lot more in common than we do different. And the idea that that would be a focus for what we want is something that I think was very important to this body.
From the Senate, the bill now moves to the House for debate and consideration. For Capitol Journal, I'm Jeff Sanders.
I'll speak in more detail about this issue with State Senator Will Barfoot and State Senator Rodger Smitherman later in the show. The House worked through a relatively non-controversial agenda of bills this week, though plenty of debate took place both on the floor and in committee. Capitol Journal's Randy Scott catches us up on what happened in the lower chamber this week.
A proposal lawmakers have seen in several forms was once again in the House chamber. House Bill 42 addresses handling Alabama's human trafficking problem.
This bill, under existing law, trafficking in first degree is a Class A felony, which is 20 years. So what this bill does is change it, as long as it's someone that is 18 years old or younger, to a mandatory life sentence.
So you kept somebody in prison for life, but what did you do to stop the trafficking or to begin a process of getting to the trafficker?
Another proposal before lawmakers, House Bill 62 seeks to solve the problem of too many cases clogging the state judicial system.
The substance of this bill is to allow retired judges to be called back into service for the purpose mostly of getting rid of backlogs.
Both bills are approved. In the chamber, members debate House Bill 113, dealing with preparing children for the first grade.
This bill simply is a first grade readiness bill to ensure that when a child enters the first grade, they are ready and they can be comfortable in the classes. One of the things, since I've been dealing with this bill, that has disturbed me, I had a teacher to call me, and she said that the most painful thing that she had to do as a first grade teacher was to repeat a child in the first grade.
I'm for the readiness portion of it, but I'm not for moving the date from September 1st to December 31st, because what that will do is a son or daughter who has a December birthday will be 4 years old going into kindergarten. And a 4-year-old is a tremendous amount different from a 5-year-old.
House Bill 113 is approved. At the State House, Randy Scott, Capitol Journal.
The House Judiciary Committee convened its regular meeting this week, but the subject matter drew a much larger crowd than usual. That subject, gender and women's rights. House Bill 111 from State Representative Susan DuBose of Hoover is dubbed the What is a Woman Act. It would codify into state law the biological definitions of men and women. DuBose and bill supporters say it's needed to protect women in a world of gender fluidity. But the bill drew criticism from LGBT activists who call the bill discriminatory.
This bill, HB 111, is a definitions bill. It codifies the time-honored definitions of male, female, man, woman, boy, girl, mother, father, and sex. It is important to acknowledge in this bill that sex is defined as the state of being male or female at birth. Sex is objective and fixed.
I share my experience today to explain why it is so important for Alabama legislature to pass this bill. Because if passed, this bill would guarantee that when, and only when, the state designates space for women, only females may enter them. How does this do this? By defining common sex-based words like woman and female, which are already used in 160 unique Alabama statutes, by codifying the meaning of these words, we protect our laws from being manipulated by those who would gaslight women into thinking their privacy is bigotry. Let me be clear, this bill does not erase transgender people. It simply ensures that laws enacted to protect opportunities and spaces that states sets aside for women and girls do what they were intended to do.
HB 111 attempts to adopt a discriminatory, unworkable definition of sex aimed at excluding marginalized LGBTQ Alabamians from state protections, with a particularly harmful impact on our transgender Alabamians. It will also have the unintended consequence of making it harder for all women to utilize state non-discrimination laws to address sexual harassment and sex stereotyping. This is direct and blatant discrimination, and it's unconstitutional, plain and simple.
No vote was taken on that bill since it was just a public hearing. It could come up for a vote in the committee next week. The Judiciary Committee also took up the issue of guns, and specifically devices that can be attached to handguns to convert them into de facto machine guns. House Bill 36 from State Representative Philip Ensler of Montgomery would prohibit such devices and set penalties for those caught with converted weapons. Ensler explained the bill to members of the committee.
And a very similar one came up in committee last year and passed, but the one last year did not mirror federal law. So with this version this year, it mirrors federal law, but then has some language in there to address some of the questions or concerns. Big picture, I've heard from law enforcement throughout the state that have been picking up weapons with these devices on them, but there's currently no state crime that prohibits them. They're only prohibited under federal law. So this would just add a tool to the toolbox on the state level when it comes to weapons with these devices. The two changes in the substitute, on line 61, we added in explicit language that says that any parts that are licensed under federal law would be exempt. So they're already exempt, but we just explicitly put that in. And then the second part, on line 48, we just put language clarifying that it's not possession of the device itself, but it's possession of the firearm that has the device on it.
I do have a question, however, on the penalty piece.
Sure.
Under first violation, it's punishable by not less than 100 hours of community service. That second subsequent violation jumps to a felony. That's a pretty big leap between those two. Can you talk to me about that first violation, why we've set it so low at community service?
Yeah, so the feedback that I've gotten from law enforcement is that it's often younger people, younger adults that have these. They maybe have seen on social media or heard that they're popular and they're getting their hands on them. So the first time around, what we would want to do is to steer them towards mentorship programs, maybe working with clergy to steer away from that culture of gun violence. But then the second time around, it's telling them, well, hey, this is there's going to be an even more severe consequence.
That bill was advanced by the committee and now goes to the full House. One profile issue that is idle for the moment is the comprehensive gambling package passed by the House last week. Senators say they want to take their time with the legislation and review it. State Senator Greg Albritton, who is carrying the package in the Senate, said his colleagues are in the process of asking questions and perhaps making changes to the bills.
The more we discuss, the closer we get. The more we explain and go through where we are, because look, we've been working on this for this particular bill, if you will, for 10 years. And many of the folks that have these questions haven't been involved in a lot of that. And the cost, and even some questions have come up as to the criminal aspects of it. And so those we got to deal with. And all of these we've talked about in previous meetings and hearings into the development process, but the members have got to be assured that we've dealt with their issues.
Advocates gathered at the Capitol this week to rally for greater access to affordable child care. Manufacture Alabama and the Women's Foundation of Alabama have joined forces to promote legislation that would offer tax credits to businesses and workers for child care. They say it's a critical component for increasing the state's workforce participation rate.
This is our opportunity to bring together hundreds of women from all parts of this great state to talk about the issues that matter most to Alabama's economy through the lens of how they are experienced by women in Alabama. Child care does work, and Alabama will work when she works for women.
In 2022, 85,000 hard-working Alabama families needed access to child care, but no quality or affordable options in the communities were available. That's something that we plan on changing this session.
This piece of legislation that we're looking at to address the child care shortage in the state of Alabama, expanding access and opportunities for families all across the state of Alabama. Mothers and families that have had to make a decision between going into the workforce and breaking even to pay for child care or staying home with their child. No mother and no family in this state or in this country should have to make a choice between breaking even to pay for child care or staying at home.
This year in the legislature, we're committing to removing obstacles that prevent Alabamians from entering the workforce and unleashing their full potential, especially women. The best way for us to doing that is supporting parents, especially mothers. No one should have to choose between caring for their child and providing for their family. It's time to invest in an industry that keeps Alabama working. That is child care.
Thursday was Higher Education Day here at the State House. Thousands of college students marched and rallied to urge lawmakers to support higher education. SGA presidents from the state's 14 public colleges and universities signed a pledge to work together to promote higher ed.
What we're going to do here today is we're going to have a real quick opportunity for all of our elected officials to hear about how we want to work together to make Alabama a better place, right? And we know that universities have a role in making that happen, right? So to show our solidarity and show our willingness to work together, your SGA presidents and your mascots are here to make a symbolic statement. We believe in Alabama and we are part of the team.
Listen, you all are so important to us. You're our future. We want to do everything we can to be able to support your universities and support you individually to be able to be all that you want to be. As I've talked to students today, I've talked to art majors, I've talked to accountants, I've talked to those that want to be nurses and physicians, and every other category. And wow, we need you desperately to continue to pursue and be successful in what you're doing with your educations so you can be great productive citizens to help all of us moving forward in Alabama.
Y'all are our future. When you look at what's going on right now in Alabama, it's amazing. You know, the economy's the best it's been in years. And when you talk about opportunity, I talk to businesses all over, talk to people, and they want to continue to move to Alabama because of the businesses that are here, but more important, the people. And, you know, my message to y'all is y'all are our future. Continue to, you know, make sure you dive in on your major. And then we want you in Alabama after you graduate so you can make a difference.
And that's the week that was in the Alabama legislature. Coming up next, I'll speak with Dr. Mamie McLean, a fertility specialist who has insight into the Supreme Court's ruling on embryos. After that, I'll sit down with House Speaker Nathaniel Ledbetter to review the week and get an update on that gambling legislation passed by the House last week. And after that, we'll go deeper on the DEI issue. I'll speak with bill sponsor Senator Will Barfoot and Democratic Senator Rodger Smitherman, who opposes the bill. We'll be right back.
You can watch past episodes of Capital Journal online at video.aptv.org. Capital Journal episodes are also available on APTV's free mobile app. You can also connect with Capital Journal and link to past episodes on Capital Journal's Facebook page. And you can listen to past episodes of Capital Journal when you're driving or on the go with Capital Journal podcasts. Keep up with what's happening with Capital Journal.
Welcome back to Capital Journal. As we've reported, some fertility clinics in Alabama have paused their in vitro fertilization treatments after the Alabama Supreme Court ruled that a frozen embryo can be considered a child under Alabama law. Joining me next to talk about it is Dr. Mamie McLean of Alabama Fertility, a clinic that specializes in IVF. Dr. McLean, thanks for coming on Capital Journal.
Thanks for having me, Todd.
Well, let me ask you, what has been the reaction in the IVF community, both from the industry side on the clinics, but also for the couples who are pursuing IVF in order to have children?
Todd, we're so worried. We actually got word this morning that one of the major shipping companies for embryos is not going to be providing services in Alabama. So that means that our patients not only can't receive the treatments that they need to have children, but they won't be able to take their embryos to a different state to have children. So our patients are just feeling powerless, but they're angry. They feel certain that the Supreme Court did not intend this consequence. And we are pleading with the lawmakers in Alabama to please help us offer advanced fertility treatment to the women and families of Alabama. We simply deserve it. It's a basic human right or American right to decide whether to have children, when to have children, and for a patient and her husband and the doctor to decide how best it is for them to have children.
You know, many of our viewers, and me included, may not really understand everything about the IVF process. Can you kind of walk us through what the science is? What is a frozen embryo as opposed to one, implanted? Can you walk us through the science and technology of how IVF works?
Mm-hmm. So IVF treatment has two phases. The first phase is where the patient takes about 2 weeks of fertility injections, 2 to 3 shots per day. The result of that is to mature and grow eggs within the ovary. The patient then undergoes their first procedure, which is called an egg retrieval, where we remove the eggs. We're then able to fertilize those eggs with sperm, and then the embryos are able to grow and develop in our lab. Once the embryos have reached a stage where they are able to be assessed for health and viability, then we are able to either transfer an embryo back to the uterus for a pregnancy or freeze embryos for future use. And modern day fertility care involves cryopreservation. In the old days, our freezing techniques just simply weren't very good. And so we were worried that the embryos wouldn't survive. But now cryopreservation has allowed couples to have children because it can often take 2 to 3 embryo transfers to have a baby. So if we are limited in our ability to freeze embryos, then these couples simply won't be successful. There will be fewer babies born in the state of Alabama.
As you probably know, lawmakers here in Montgomery are working on a legislative fix to this. There are multiple pieces of legislation aiming to protect IVF clinics, to make sure that this is not going to be a problem and that they can continue operations. What would be your message to the legislature as it considers fixing this in Alabama law?
We are so grateful that they are hearing us. Our patients are brave, they're resilient, and we believe that this is a basic American right, that they are arguing on behalf of the citizens of Alabama. The work they're doing is important for the future of Alabama, for future families, and frankly, in the best interest of our state. And we are so grateful that they're working hard. We want to support them in whatever way we can, and encourage them to keep moving forward.
Well, we're going to be following this very closely moving forward, but I really appreciate your time coming on Capital Journal to explain this as an expert in the field. Doctor, thanks again. We'll be right back.
Joe Cain is regarded as the founder of Mobile's modern-day Mardi Gras celebration. In 1868, some say, in defiance of the Union occupation of Mobile, Joe Cain and 6 others paraded through downtown in a decorated charcoal wagon. Cain was dressed as fictional Chickasaw chieftain Slackabama Renico. Along the route, Cain, or the chief, symbolically declared an end to Mobile's suffering and signaled the return of the city's parading activities. Jocane Day, also known as the People's Parade, occurs on the Sunday before Fat Tuesday, and it has become a cherished tradition in Mobile since the first procession in 1967. Jocane is buried in the Church Street graveyard in downtown Mobile. His granite tombstone, incised with the image of a jester, reads, "Here lies old Jocane, the heart and soul of Mardi Gras in Mobile."
You're watching Alabama Public Television.
Welcome back to Capitol Journal. Joining me next is the Speaker of the House, Nathaniel Ledbetter. Mr. Speaker, thanks for coming on the show.
It's good to be here, Todd.
Well, we're now 1/3 of the way through the legislative session. It's kind of crazy to think about.
It is.
It's gone pretty quickly. Are you pleased so far with the progress?
Yeah, I am. I mean, we've had some heavy lifts and moved a lot of bills this week, so I am. I think we got behind a little bit. We're catching back up. We've had 250 bills filed. I think we'll have probably 1/3 of them through the body, and so we're on pace. We'll be on pace by the end of this day.
Been going fast, these 3-day weeks where, committee meetings on Wednesday, but also chamber meetings. I was going to ask you, is there any concern about the pace being so fast, maybe things getting lost in the shuffle, maybe running out of time at the end?
Well, I think we take that all into account when we meet. I meet with Greg Reed every Tuesday with the pro tem in the Senate, and we kind of go over the schedule, what we're going to be looking at and what we see, and kind of see what they're moving, what we'll see coming next, and they do the same thing for us. So I feel comfortable at where we're at. I know we'll have a spring break coming up pretty soon, and we're going to move a lot of bills before that. And you'll see us go back to 2 days and use the Wednesday back for committee days.
Well, the House wasted no time passing the comprehensive gambling package, 2-bill package. It's a big deal because what's the narrative that always dies in the House? How many times have you heard that?
Yeah.
But it passed this time. It was really the first thing taken up. Now it goes to the Senate. We'll see what they do to it. But I'd like you to take me behind the scenes. What was the difference maker? What did it take to earn the support of the caucus like it did?
Well, I think it was just time. I mean, like you said, the Senate's already passed a bill similar to this twice. And again, and a lottery bill once. They've already voted on gaming 3 times and got it out of their chamber, and we haven't. So for my office, all year last year, it was every day, every week, we'd have somebody come in and say, wanting to do a CA or wanting to do a comprehensive bill or wanting to do this or that. And I just pushed them off because I didn't think it was fair for our freshmen. They hadn't been there long enough to understand the process and what was happening. So with all the people coming to me and talking about it, we put a committee together. Just an ad hoc committee, not a standing committee. It's just an ad hoc committee. Say, do the research. What's going on in the state? Why are we getting so many requests? And once they did that, it kind of shined a light on a lot of illegal operations. And we've talked about that before, without question. I see people talk about expanding gaming. This does right the opposite. I mean, this cuts it way down. We know that there's probably over 500 illegal sites in just about every county. And sometimes just because you don't see them doesn't mean they're not there. But they are, and we also know some of those has turned into drug houses as well. So I think that is part of it, and just having the conversation. It started at last year. It took a year. They went through the process. They went to different facilities and kind of watched and see what was going on. And then they brought in everybody involved. They brought the Senate in. They brought the governor's office in and worked on the bill. So and I think the last time that Chairman Witt had told me at that time they had 10 different representatives that added to the bill. So they had a chance to have the conversation with the bill, and he and Chairman Blackshield did a great job. They spent hours upon hours answering any kind of questions the members may have. They were open. Even before we put the bill out, we had the bone work of the bill that they had, and members could come by and see it and read it and check and see if there were any changes. So I think that's part of it. I think it's just the process was a little different. It was slowed down. I hear people talk about it move fast. Well, in fact, it didn't. I mean, we'd worked on it for over a year. It was a topic of conversation in the caucus retreat. So it had been on the table for quite some time. And So, you know, I think all in all, that's probably the reason that it moved this time, was because the dialogue was there and the members had a chance.
Mm-hmm. You did hear concerns expressed on the floor by some of your caucus members, hearing some of the same thing in the Senate. You know, so how do you respond to those concerns, you know, about addiction, fears of corruption, social ills? When those concerns are placed at you, how do you respond?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's all legitimate concerns, and it should be. And if you think that, you should vote for the bill, because it does away with all that. You know, it puts a law enforcement arm in place to shut down the illegal operations. As you know, you've been around a while. Our gaming laws in Alabama is terrible. I mean, there's no question about this. This fixes all that. It shuts down 18 CAs where people's already voted on, where they're already running operations. And I think that's the misunderstanding behind this. These facilities are already out there, but they're not regulated. And they're not, you know, not only they're not regulated, there's not a law enforcement arm that really goes in and can shut them down or shut down something they're not doing right. They don't have an auditing process, you know. So, and as the Supreme Court says, they're all illegal. Well, okay, if they're all illegal, why are we running dog games, you know, dog track games? I mean, so they've just moved from what they were running to now, because of legislation in the past, it makes dog racing legal. They've went to those type machines. So, no, it's not clear. It's not crystal clear, and I think this bill makes it crystal clear, and it shuts down a lot of the corruption. You know, without question, there is illegal operators in our state that is organized crime. And I think there's a lot of narrative going on during this bill that's misleading, intentionally, not only from the illegal operators, but also from outside sources from other states that don't want to see this bill pass because they're making money off Alabamians. So no, I think if the truth of the matter is, it shuts down most of the corruption.
Switching topics, you know, it's been a relatively smooth sailing so far in the House. Not a lot of blow-ups and things like that. Still early.
Yeah, really.
But so it might get bumpier down the stretch, right? I'm thinking upstairs in the Senate, they're hearing arguments on DEI, gender issues, always thorny. So how, you know, knowing that those issues are probably going to percolate up, what's your plan to kind of let them come to the floor, let them be debated, but not let the order get out of control?
Yeah, I think the thing is, I think it was beneficial to me for being majority leader, because I was able to work those issues sometimes before they ever come to the floor. I do think conversation with the members that's opposed to it or against it, and in those cases, you know, if it's the Democrats that's opposed to it, it's having a conversation about what we're looking at doing. And I'm not one of those that likes to run over people. I want them to be involved in the conversation, and I want us to try to work it out, you know. And I understand if they got concerns, as long as we don't get repetitive and it's a good conversation, I'm okay with that. And that's when it gets repetitive, it's time for us to move on. And I think last year when we went through some of those issues, you've seen that, and we had good conversations, and you know, we worked with the minority leader as well as the majority leader and try to work through those issues. I mean, you know, we had some on the floor just yesterday, but we worked through them while the process was going. Some bills we may carry over, bring them back. You know, a lot of the bills that the Senate's working on, let's be honest, we've already passed every one of those. You know, the red meat bills that they're talking about with the ballot harvesting, I guess the DEI,
critical race theory, all that kind of stuff.
We've already passed all those. Right. So, you know, they just didn't make it through the Senate for some reason or another. So we'll get those back, and you know, we're going to try to get them passed. But you know, we're going to do it, I think, in a professional way. And I commended our body today, because I felt like when we talked about the gaming legislation, they were very professional. Whether you were for it or against it, that was your privilege, but you're professional in handling it. And that's all I ask from our members, on both sides. Let's respect each other and be professionals.
While I have you, I wanted to ask about workforce. This has kind of been the watchword of this year leading up to the session. We've talked about it on this show. We're awaiting legislation from the Lieutenant Governor on his report. But you've also mentioned on the workforce issue, healthcare, and how that can be a barrier to the workforce, and how finding a solution for those who just don't have health insurance and can't afford health insurance, finding a solution to that. There's this talk of a public-private partnership that would use Medicaid expansion dollars, but maybe not necessarily be Medicaid expansion. Is that something that you think can truly happen in Alabama? Is that feasible?
Yeah, I don't know. We'll see. We'll kind of have the conversation. I've always been against expanding Medicaid. I don't think that benefits us. You know, the public-private's a different animal because there's about half of the people that's already does have insurance that wouldn't be taken off insurance, that would actually stay on commercial insurance. So, you know, Arkansas did a very similar program to that, and there's others out there that has, and I think it certainly doesn't hurt to look and see how successful they've been and how it's affected them. My biggest thing with expansion, of course, I've been in government before and being the mayor of a small town, I've seen federal programs come and go. Now, they're fine when they're there and they're paying for it, but then when they go, you got to pick up the dollar. And that's not always easy, and that's been my biggest concern about expansion of Medicaid. So we'll see. I do think we need to have a dialogue. That's the position we're in. That's what we were elected to do, was have a conversation about it. We'll just have to see how it goes.
Okay. Yeah, something to watch going forward. We're out of time, Mr. Speaker, but thank you for your time, and we'll catch up going forward.
Thank you, Todd. I appreciate it.
We'll be right back.
You can watch past episodes of Capitol Journal online anytime at Alabama Public Television's website, aptv.org. Click on the Online Video tab on the main page. You can also connect with Capitol Journal and link to past episodes on Capitol Journal's Facebook page.
Originally designated as a postal route in 1806, the old federal road stretched through the Creek Indian Territory of Lower Alabama. Alabama's federal road functioned as a major thoroughfare for western migration into the Old Southwest, ushering in a new era of national expansion and exploitation of Native American territory. Although much of the federal road has disappeared, portions of it remain today.
Welcome back to Capitol Journal. Joining me next is State Senator Will Barfoot from here in Montgomery. Senator, thanks for coming on the show.
Glad to be here. Thank you, Todd.
Absolutely. Well, you spent a lot of time on the floor this week because your bill was up. This is the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Bill, DEI.
Yeah.
Pretty controversial, long filibuster, a lot of debate. Can you just start off by explaining what exactly this bill does?
Yeah, sure. Well, let me explain what the attempt to do is, and let me dive into what the bill actually accomplishes and what some of the naysayers have said that it does that it in fact doesn't do. DEI has been a problem throughout the nation, specifically at Alabama. DEI offices at higher institutions of education, public universities, have really worked to divide us rather than unite us. And the DEI, or diversity, equity, and inclusion, sounds inviting, and it sounds like something we should all get behind. But in fact, those DEI offices around the state have been used to kind of silo people by race, by color, by religion, ethnicity, or national origin. And so what this bill does is effectively eliminates those DEI offices that have been used to divide rather than to unite us.
Now, I remember, late last year and really even into this year, the Harvard situation. You had those college presidents. DEI was kind of a watchword as those were. Is that part of what we're talking about here?
It is, and in the natural extension, if you'll remember last summer, the Supreme Court, United States Supreme Court, came out with the SFFA, the Students for Fair Admissions versus Harvard opinion, which basically said you can't consider race, or you shouldn't have race be a considerate factor or a predominant factor when it comes to admissions. Now, that case dealt specifically with admissions and didn't go further than that, but the natural extension of that case that was handed down by the United States Supreme Court is that we should not be promoting one race or another, or we should not be demoting one race or sex or national origin of another. I mean, there's too many things that unite us, and we shouldn't try to focus on the things that divide us. And this bill is an attempt, honestly, to try to remove those impediments, to remove the divisions that we have, especially with state dollars. And that's what the bill is aimed at. You're certainly welcome to feel and say what you want on an individual basis. Doesn't affect free speech in any form or fashion. But we're not going to pay for that divisive concepts or that division at our universities.
Well, yeah, I want to ask you about that, because what I heard from the opponents of the bill, your colleagues on the Democratic side, Senator Smitherman and his colleagues as well, was that, look, we need these programs. We have not gotten beyond our racial problems. they brought up specific incidents of racist comments and things like that and said, hey, we don't just need this on college campuses, we need it in other institutions, including the legislature. So how do you respond to arguments that say, hey, we need DEI and things like that to promote, diversity, equity, and inclusion?
Well, so I would say that some of the comments by my colleagues are exactly right. Unfortunately, we do have racism, we do have sexism, we do categorize people and try to value their worth based on external factors that we shouldn't consider to value their worth by. This bill does away with that. Can't change the human heart or the human spirit by legislation, but what we can do is we're not going to pay to continue to do those things. We're not going to put taxpayer dollars into an issue or to a government program that would ultimately strives to divide us. There are universities around the states. For instance, Troy University has never had and doesn't have a DEI program, and I'm happy that they don't, and happy that this bill will not affect them. But their diversity level is 40-something% minorities without having a DEI office. We should celebrate the ability for people of different backgrounds, colors, religions, and everything else to come together and to learn together, but without categorizing people just because of the color of their skin or their background.
Well, let me ask you about that, because I would imagine that universities, higher education, would be pretty interested in this bill. It would, really dictate what they can do and can't do on their campuses. What's been the reaction from the higher ed community? Do they have concerns? Have y'all been in dialogue?
Yeah, so they did have some concerns, and there were some amendments that we took on the floor by some of my Democratic colleagues, and they were right to kind of look at what the unintended consequences were. I think some of those amendments actually cured that. We don't want to cause problems to Title IX sports. There are certain things that in the bill itself that, if we'd have left it the way it was, would have caused problems, and we were able to cure that on the floor, and I'm thankful for my Democratic colleagues to point those things out.
The bill also contains a measure that you brought last year dealing with divisive concepts.
Yeah.
It used to be called critical race theory, and
Sure.
kind of specifically, but it's more broad. Divisive concepts, really prohibiting the teaching and promotion of that in public schools. Why did you decide to put that in this bill and kind of make it more expansive?
Yeah, so the divisive concepts bill that's been brought up for the past 2 years that hasn't passed, we decided these two concepts kind of identify or marry with each other, meld into each other. I forgot what Chief Justice it was that said he couldn't define what pornography was, but he knew it when he saw it, right? And that's kind of what the opposition to CRT has been, is that tell me what CRT is. We don't use the word CRT in this bill at all. It's divisive concepts, and those divisive concepts are that you cannot make somebody agree to or consent that one race is superior than another, or that somebody's moral character is based solely on their skin color or their gender or their background. I mean, those are divisive concepts that we don't allow in this bill. Hopefully when it makes it through the House and gets the governor's signature on that, we don't allow at the very least taxpayer dollars to pay for. Again, free expression, free speech, you believe what you want no matter how wrong you may be. Have racist thoughts, we can't control that, but we're not going to pay for it.
One of the comments you made on the floor in responding to Senator Smitherman was, he had questions about slavery, Jim Crow, some of these painful and tough to talk about subjects, but that need to be taught. And you said, absolutely, teach
100%.
it, you must. So you're confident this bill would not impact that?
100%. I've used this before. My mama was a history teacher. She passed away, unfortunately, but if she were alive today and she thought this bill did anything to erase history of any kind, that she would have been against it, and therefore I would have been against it, right? I mean, we need to talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly. There's plenty of that to go around, and unless we talk about all of that, including the bad and the ugly, we will never be able to benefit from those experiences. We will benefit to know why we're at, how we got to where we're at. So it's important to talk about those. And quite honestly, the comment the other day that that I made on the floor too, my wife talks about Valentine's Day, and you don't have to, there are 364 other days that you should treat me the way I do on Valentine's Day. And I use that as an example of we shouldn't just put Black history into one month. We need to be talking about that all year long. And to Senator Smitherman's point, there were individuals who you will never know their names. May have been a female, may have been a Hispanic person, an indigenous person. We need to talk about the achievements that they have and the incremental changes that we've had throughout the history of the state of Alabama based on what they've helped us to do. So,
Well, we will be watching this bill going forward. It was a long debate on the Senate floor, but now it's done. You can leave it to the House, and we'll be watching that bill going forward. Thank you, Senator, for your time, and we'll see you next week.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
We'll be right back.
You can watch past episodes of Capital Journal online at video.aptv.org. Capital Journal episodes are also available on APTV's free mobile app. You can also connect with Capital Journal and link to past episodes on Capital Journal's Facebook page. And you can listen to past episodes of Capital Journal when you're driving or on the go with Capital Journal podcasts. Keep up with what's happening with Capital Journal.
Welcome back to Capital Journal. Joining me next is State Senator Rodger Smitherman from Birmingham. Senator, thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me. I mean that.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Well, it's been a pretty long week, long couple of weeks, really.
Yes.
In the legislature. Y'all had a pretty long night on the floor, day and night, dealing with really just one bill. That was this DEI, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. It would really prohibit public entities, universities, things from having DEI programs, offices, but also go into the divisive concepts, right? The race, gender, things like that. So it was a pretty expansive bill. Y'all had some fierce opposition to this bill. Can you kind of spell out your main objections to the bill as it is?
Yes, I can. The bill was intended or unintended. It was basically going to wipe out all the opportunities that had been presented for African Americans to be a part of the fiber of this country. The bill just took away those opportunities, and as such, it really set a generation and a section of this whole state's population back from all the progresses that we had made. And many times people that bring these bills don't understand that. But when you've lived a life, and I happen to have lived a life where at 16, I lived a life where segregation was legal. Jim Crow was legal, and at 17, it was not. So I've seen the struggles for starting from nothing and opportunities to get to this point in life. And many of those opportunities were made because of the pathways, the opportunities that our school made in getting our students in school and giving them an opportunity to go to those schools. A lot of people may not understand, but when you have a subjective decision that can be made by someone, and that individual can choose between someone who is black and someone who is white for the same position and the same qualifications, is that many times, unfortunately, that racism will raise its head, and when it does, that black person is just not going to get an opportunity. And what these diverse programs do is a pathway for them to get into those areas, i.e. academia, i.e. even further to go to the next level of employment, because you have to have certain certifications, and to get in. So what we were trying to make sure that a pathway still existed for African Americans, and not just African Americans, but people would have an opportunity to be able to enjoy what this country can provide for us.
I listened to some of your debate with Senator Barfoot. Y'all had some really good back and forth going there, and one of the points he was making was, look, on the divisive concepts part, was that he wants it all taught. He said, look, we want, good, bad, and ugly, we want it all taught. Y'all kind of went back and forth on different issues. Were you satisfied with what he said? Because, I can see his point about not wanting one, race or one gender promoted or one race or one gender demoted. That was kind of the point he was making. How do you respond to that?
Well, I perfectly understood what he was saying, and I don't think anybody wants to do that what he's trying to avoid happening. That was never anybody's intent. Although I'm sure that there are some instances that he can quote, and he probably will, that those kind of things took place. But at the same time, we didn't want to be to a point where you can't have a conversation about another race. You know, such as this is Black History Month, and if you've been listening, I've told them about some things that black people have invented, things that they have done that's nowhere in the history and books itself. But
it was intentionally left out in many places.
Yes, and so we wanted to make sure that our history could be told, and not just do it in 1 month, which is October, but in the books, you know, and we talk about true facts and true history. So that was one of the things in that area that we wanted to make sure that was included, and it will be included, you know, and be able to have those kind of discussions and conversations. But no, one of the things that we wanted to make sure though is simply this, and you may have heard me say this on the floor, is that no one is blaming anybody presently for what happened in the past. But what we are saying, because of what happened in the past, then it provided a complete opportunity, you know, for the majority population to be able to move forward and go forward. So if the majority population are going to control the assets, if that's what you want to call it, and then surely they've got to be involved in helping to bring the people who were suppressed, like in slavery, like denied reading for 400 years. In fact, we only really been free for a few years, and to be able to, it took to 1964 to get the right to vote. Mm-hmm. And still it has to be reauthorized every 25 years now. So what we were saying is that those kind of situations, we wanted to make sure that they were addressed, and we were saying, look, if a company who, I'll just give you an example. You go back to the past, this company of a free labor, slave labor, and they're able to now be prosperous, okay, now surely they need to participate in trying to remedy and provide opportunities for the same people, not the people, but you know, their forefathers and whatnot who were denied that. Because you know, it's like a race. You know, if you and I take out the running, we trying to get to Birmingham, and you tell me sit here until I get to Alabaster. Now you take off the running.
I got a head start.
Yeah, ain't no way I'm talking about we even now. I'm talking about as a race, you know, and that's what we want to make sure, that nobody's saying that, okay, you know, everything happened now, let's just go forward, because we still are not at the same point.
Understand. Well, while I've got you, we're short on time, but while I've got you, I wanted to talk about your bill dealing with loitering on highways. I know it passed through committee this week. Kind of explain what this bill does.
Well, what the bill was a byproduct of when I go home, I get off Green Springs Avenue, and at 5 o'clock in the evening, the freeway already is bagged up. Mm-hmm. That lane, many times that on the freeway is bagged all the way up, and in part it's because the people who are out there are right on the ramp, and so you got people who bagged up, who can't go, who may stop at that moment, but it's endangering all these other cars, mm-hmm. and all these people all the way off the interstate, because you got people coming over that interstate running 70 miles an hour.
So it's like a panhandling kind of thing?
Well, it's them trying. They're trying to get. I understand that they're trying to get revenues, but that's the wrong place to do it.
Yeah, because it's a safety issue.
It's a safety issue. It's really a serious safety issue, and so that's what the bill is saying. That look, you can't do this on these ramps. You know, we're not saying you can't do it at designated places that cities do it, and we're not trying to stop them per se from doing it. But we are trying to say that this is very unsafe, and the safe and hazardness that you may be infringing on is that we need to eliminate that, and that's what the bill does.
Well, we'll watch that going forward, and I wish you had more time because I know you've got a lot more bills to talk about. But come on back,
Okay.
and we'll get into some of your other legislation because I know that DEI took up a lot, today and this week. But thank you, Senator. And
Thank you very much.
We'll see you next week.
All right, good to be here. Thank you
right.
very much.
We'll be right back.
Born Melvin Allen Israel, Jefferson County native Mel Allen delivered radio play-by-play for the New York Yankees for 25 years at the height of the team's success and was one of the most recognizable voices in sportscasting for 6 decades. He began his career in 1935 broadcasting Alabama and Auburn football games. As the voice of the Yankees, Mel's game-calling style was a model for present-day baseball announcers, with phrases like, "How about that?" and "going, gone," becoming part of the sports lexicon. In 1977, he was introduced to a new generation of baseball fans as the host of This Week in Baseball. Throughout his life, Mel Allen embraced his Alabama heritage, returning to the state frequently. He always credited his early experiences in broadcasting in Alabama for his subsequent success as one of sports broadcasting's most influential announcers.
That's our show for this week. Thanks for watching. We'll be back next week starting on Monday with our nightly coverage of the legislature at 10:30 p.m. here on Alabama Public Television. As we close the show tonight, here's some more footage of Higher Ed Day from this week. Maybe you can find your favorite mascot. For our Capitol Journal team, I'm Todd Stacy. We'll see you next time.